Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here I am, John Sneisen. And you know, baby boomers are interesting. I find baby boomers are a lot like millennials in the sense that half are really dumb and then half are ultra aware and wide awake. You know what I mean? Like, I find that this tends to be an issue often where you get a lot of hippie baby boomers that have absolutely no idea what they're talking about and want free things and want to be provided for and be dependent on the system. You get the same thing from the millennials, but then also most of our audience is also baby boomers and millennials that are highly aware of their surroundings. It's like almost like a rebellion against their own generation. And I get that being a millennial myself, but I want to go into this Forbes magazine article that says the coming bear market will be especially painful for the boomers. And as the article goes into, my back of the napkin math says retirement accounts are at least 50% invested in equity index funds. Some of you are now asking, what's the problem? All those index funds have come back. Everybody is back to where they started. Not so fast, Jack. Bear markets destroy retirement funds. Bear markets that are not followed by a recession have V-shaped recoveries. The December bump, which barely qualifies for a bear market, is exactly what we got. Bear markets that are followed by a recession take a very long time to recover. They also tend to be in the 40 to 50% loss range. Remember, a 50% loss requires a 100% gain to break even. That took about 5 years from the bottom of the last bear market. Plus, investors seldom capture all the upside in equities. The S&P is up well over 3.5 times, give or take, in the last 10 years. But the 401ks and IRAs did not even double. Some of that is due to investors getting out at the bottom and back in later. Some is maybe due to high bond allocations in 2009. Bond funds have done very well back then, and we know people chase returns. Bottom line, retirement funds have not done as well as you might expect in the last decade. The next bear market will be even more painful. When the next recession and bear market hit, it will take even longer to bounce back. The recovery will be even slower than this last one. My research shows that large amounts of debt slows recovery. Very large amounts create flat economies, and we are approaching very large amounts in the US. The next recession will shortly blow up the US debt to $30 trillion. It won't take long to hit 40 trillion. And by the way, at this point, it's all theater. That doesn't even mean anything. Like, the debt past $1 trillion is already absurd enough. But anyway, going on, it says, will that much debt turn us Japanese? That's not entirely clear. The US has the world's reserve currency and a unique role in global commerce and finance, but at a minimum, the recovery will be slower. A double dip recession is also possible, making stock market index fund losses even worse. You must have some kind of strategy for dealing with market volatility. A double problem for baby boomers. The baby boom generation that is now reaching retirement age has a double problem. First, many of its members didn't save enough cash to support a comfortable retirement. Second, those who did save enough could see it evaporate when we get into another bear market, which we certainly will at some point. So here are a few pieces of advice from me. First, save. That's self-explanatory. Don't rely on Social Security, which won't give you enough to retire comfortably. Second, invest in programs that give you at least a chance to dodge bear markets. Buy and hold works in theory, but not for most people, because we are humans with emotions. We should recognize that and take steps to control it. As I continually say, we should invest in trading strategies and not buy and hold index funds in this environment. And of course, fixed income strategies like actual bond, real estate, private credit, and so on. And that's from John Malden, a contributor to Forbes. And I do want to mention, I don't agree with everything he's saying there for sure. I do want to mention that, we see this issue with pensions really getting to the point of no return. Worldwide, the pension shortfall is set to hit as much as $400 trillion by the year 2050, which is more than 4 times the entire world's GDP. It's absolutely absurd. And on top of that, we see this debt climbing and climbing by the day. And at one point, you got to just kind of say, like, why does this even affect me anymore? It's such a high amount of debt that it cannot be at all sustainable in any way. And I do also want to mention the world reserve currency part. China and India is a huge factor in this story as well. China and India are set to take over the United States in the coming years. So on top of that, the faith in the US dollar is being completely lost. The US dollar is being swapped out of. What happens then on top of everything else? People don't have their pensions. The dollar crashes because it doesn't have faith anymore. China and India take over. I mean, think about it, folks. This is an incredibly serious problem and goes to the dependency of people on government and banks, because why do people depend on their pensions that are taken out of their checks to put into these 401ks that, well, let's face it, they don't really have a lot of control over. They just have to depend on and trust someone else to invest it wisely, and that they're going to be able to get all their money for their future and not have to work till the day they die. John, what do you think about this story?
Well, let's first of all go into 401ks and RSPs. They were created by the banks and the government, so you get a little bit of money up front in a tax deduction when you put money into the fund. And then on the back side, the government gets a huge amount of taxes back when you retire. A lot more than most people didn't even realize that they had to pay, a regular income tax on that money. I have a friend of mine that is a financial advisor that's kind of against the stream. He's telling people about this all the time, how they're created against you. And of course, what happens is with the banks on the other side, or the investment institutions, they get their management expense ratios, all these different fees that they suck out of your portfolio, on top of even if you got to remember, even if you lose money with these guys, you will still pay the management expense ratios. And then of course you have inflation on top of that nobody's mentioning, that you're losing money on. So a lot of times people are just close to even when you actually account for real inflation into the equation with those.
Yeah, if they're lucky with the taxes like you mentioned and the inflation like you mentioned, they're losing their purchasing power all the time. So what really good is that when they could be investing in things themselves and actually coming out of it with something?
Yeah, no, and now of course, most people are in the equities markets because that's where the return has been. And the problem is, are they going to go back to the bond markets? They're hoping that the bond, prices are going to go up. You're going to see like 5, 6, 7, 10% in debt. I personally, I think that they're going to try a one last kick at the can here, because I believe they've been in the depression since 2008, when they just papered over. Well, not anymore. You can't really call it papered over, printed over with their electronic printing presses, and it's just been hidden, the actual the actual deflation in the markets that is constantly a pressure on everything, because people...
Yeah, it never recovered. I mean, the banks are still bankrupt, as you've gone into extensively.
Of course, yeah, and so this is a big problem. And now, of course, you're looking at the Fed is at 2.25%. The Bank of Canada is at 1.75, I believe. So you're seeing these, like, they're entering into a turbulent time, which actually started back in January. I don't know if you remember, not this January, but February 2018, when you had a big up and down, and then it got quiet, and then it started again in March, and then we had another one. It started again in in December of last year, and then it started again in March now, where you see more volatility again. It just shows you that the markets are just so manipulated by the corporations that are using all this debt that is getting created to buy back their own shares, to prop up their share value. There's so many zombie corporations that literally have to get into more debt in order to pay off their current interest, just the interest on their loan, and they're accruing ever more, but they're just basically working on the Keynesian principle. When you corrupt the money supply with the government doing that, you're also forcing everybody else to do that at one point, where they hit that wall where they have to start borrowing money. And that's what you're seeing in the economy right now, of course, in the United States, everywhere else in the world, right? And the problem here is, the baby boomers also have another asset other than, of course, their stock portfolios. It's their houses. Well, what are we seeing with the houses, right? They've been using them as ATMs, a lot of them, and they've been racking up on debt left, right, and center, and credit card debt, whatever it is, massive car loans. So people, I get the feeling that people believe that they would never even be able to pay it back because you corrupted the monetary system on top. The politician doesn't believe that they're ever going to pay it back. Then the corporations and also the people are just following suit because they're like, hey, who gives a crap about debt anymore? You just accumulate mass amounts of it, and then it just goes until that. Until the proverbial, printing presses works until a certain point where people can't afford their food anymore. They can't afford just regular standards of living.
Well, John, we've seen this a million times before. I mean, all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. Always have, always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. But this time it's getting worse. It's worse than I've ever seen it before. I mean, going back to the Great Depression, at least people were known to at least account a bit. Like they were accounting, they were keeping their accounting in check. They were budgeting things. People don't even care about that anymore. People are so dependent that they aren't responsible enough to take care of their own money, and they depend on the government and the banks to do it for them, which always leads to them being more dependent on their knees and slaves.
Yeah, no, what's going to happen there, Josh, is that the Federal Reserve is going to come in again, and a whole bunch of array of others. Actually, look at Japan, what's happening there. That's what we're going to face very soon, because we have the same trends. We had that demographic cliff, and then they just keep on printing more and more money. Their yen is getting more and more worthless. Meanwhile, they're not getting anywhere. People are getting less and less ahead. They're living in little coffin apartments, right? And that's like their corporations are really struggling. The thing is, like, they were actually able to export their goods still to the United States when they had that crisis. Well, who's the United States going to export anything to today? Well, there's literally like very few things that are getting produced in the United States. So that is going to be a huge problem here on top.
And a lot of fake numbers too, John. I mean, like, they're trying to say that it's so bearish right now. It's a calm before the storm, folks, and it's just a big, gigantic bull trap, in my opinion, because if you look at it from the fundamental point of view, basic economics, really, this stock market has been propped up into oblivion, and it's 95% of it's terrible, 5% is good, exactly what we saw in the dot-com bubble and the stock market crashes of the past. And, it doesn't matter if it's a good stock. If 95% is bad, it'll all be brought down, and it'll take a long time to recover. And there's just this weird speculation based on nothing that's fundamentally good, all while the dollar is being swapped out of worldwide, and all these problems are starting to amount at the same time with the everything bubble worldwide. And that is so heavily based on heavy centralization, manipulation, and people not understanding money at all. I mean, people do not understand money these days. People don't even know what their bills are, what these fiat Federal Reserve bills are. They just don't understand that they're technically IOUs for things that don't exist, and they're being extorted for so much money, such a huge percentage of their hard-earned money to pay off the interest on the debt, and of course, blow up people overseas and all that kind of stuff. I mean, people just cannot comprehend that they're being led to the slaughter and being used as a tool, as a pawn to sacrifice for the king and the queen. It's so sad that we have to go over this so much, because people simply don't understand this problem, except for our viewers and other people's viewers in independent media. But of course, we're being stifled too, so we're not getting our message out to as many people, because they're getting to the point of desperation mode. They're trying to raise interest rates. They're trying to prop up the system as long as they humanly can, because I don't think they are ready for the crash. They knew it was coming, but I don't think they're ready.
Yeah, they're not raising interest rate anymore. They stopped. They're going to go, in my point of view, we're going to see negative interest rates because they're going to push it down. But in order to do that,
they have to.
In order to do that, though, what do they need? They need a cashless society in order to then manipulate us, because what they're trying to force us to do is actually spending money into the economy that is getting printed en masse, so you actually get like a little bit of high at the end of the cycle in the economy. The thing is, they are moving towards a complete enslavement system, and meanwhile, you're going to see the Federal Reserve and other central banks just owning more and more of all the assets in the world. I wrote the article back like a year or so ago, or I think even 2 years ago now, where I said the Federal Reserve will own everything, then nothing, because that's what's going to happen here. They're going to just keep on printing and buying assets, manipulating the markets, these central bankers, until the actual people and the world says that I'm not accepting these US dollars anymore. These US dollars are not worth anything anymore, and I can't take it as a medium of exchange because it's not a store of value. And that is what money is supposed to be, that, but it's not money, it's currency. And they've just been printing as much as they can of this currency. And and that's where you're seeing this massive like flood away from the US dollar now. Like you see in China, Japan, and Russia, the some of the biggest holders of the US dollar, they are moving away. You're having the euro saying that, oh, we might want to be a reserve currency, and then you have, of course, China, the communists over there, trying to get world domination with their currency. They're just printing oblivious amount. But that actually, what's funny with China, though, Josh, is that they're actually following the United States system. They are printing massive amounts of money. They're buying up stuff in Vancouver, in Africa, in Singapore. They're building massive smart cities of 300 billion. They're just like blatantly like shoving trillions of yen all around the world to buy up assets that they are printing. So you won't see that crazy inflation yet in China. Because they're shipping their money overseas. Oh, surprise. Well, that's exactly what propped up and created the US empire. So they are trying to use the exact same failed, flawed strategy that we're seeing now that the United States did. And now we're going to see it implode faster because they're doing it so much faster than the United States ever was able to, because we didn't have the technology. But now it's just like, look at what we have. Like, we have this mountain of debt. Like, it's literally like looking at this tsunami. Like, you have a big meteorite. It's almost like you've been talking about, the big meteorite that potentially created the wave that flooded the world, right? That has been talked about
Melted
in religions.
the ice, as a younger ice.
We're gonna see the tsunami, the debt, like all the debt is gonna be like a huge meteorite just slamming into Earth, and it's just gonna completely eviscerate the whole economy because it's unsustainable. There's nobody that are able to keep this up anymore. But in these crises, if you actually own real things like food, water, shelter, all this stuff, and then of course your wealth insurance, gold and silver, you can be off the grid with cryptocurrency and so on. You could actually position yourself in a place, because when you look at history, it tells us that those assets, of course, except for cryptos, because they haven't been able to go through a crisis yet, but all the other ones have told us that if you hold real things have value, not the paper that you can print into oblivion, Josh.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go into the solutions in a few minutes, but I want to first just mention, look, we have this cashless society system that you're talking about, highly centralized, based in legal tender laws. It is fiat, unlike, cryptocurrencies that are decentralized and not enforced by fiat, by law, by force, by legal tender laws and all that kind of stuff. But I do want to mention, we've been talking about this for years and have predicted this down to the almost detail of them raising interest rates like they did in the past in order to drop them out and avoid going negative. They will go negative this time, though. They will go negative almost for sure. And they know that. And that's why they're in this desperation mode, and they want to adopt the Chinese system. They want to adopt the social credit cashless society technocratic system, because people are so dependent. But people are more naturally dependent in places like China culturally than in the United States historically. So we have to look at that. But when the US empire is going to be replaced by the Chinese empire and the Indian empire, and by the way, China and India have been fighting a lot with each other lately, then we will have a system replace the current system, which is already terrible, and it's only going to be worse. So they know this is going to happen. They know that people will be on their knees, dependent, begging for help, begging for any offerings from the almighty state organized crime racket, as we call it. So that's very important to keep in mind. Now, before I go into all the solutions, I do want to mention to everyone watching this right now that our channel is being heavily shadow banned. We're talking in some cases 4 videos a day, only reaching a third of the people we usually get with 1 video a day, as they are stopping our videos from being seen by anyone. People aren't being notified. They're not showing up on the side panels. It's getting really bad. They're not letting me comment on a lot of the videos. They're not letting people see it when we share it. People aren't seeing our community page. So it's getting to the point where it's almost impossible. Guys, we're reaching less than 1% in a lot of cases of our 115,000 subscribers. This is absurd. This is ridiculous. This is a travesty, because this information is incredibly important to helping people make the right decisions to get out of this massive complex of servitude and of rulership and of crime, organized crime. So it's important to me that people see our content, our information. I don't care about demonetization. What I care about is that when they demonetize it, it stops people from seeing it, it shadow bans it, and a lot of our videos lately have been age restricted for no reason, so people without accounts can't see it, and it will not show to anybody on searches or on the side panel. While if you search almost anything on YouTube today, it's almost all mainstream media, no matter how many more views we have than the mainstream media. We are seeing an absolute takeover of anything, influencing people to maybe think for themselves on the internet. We saw mainstream medias die and people go to YouTube and Facebook, etc. Now YouTube and Facebook, etc. are failing, and we need to find new alternatives. But until then, we do have a subscribe star link. That's a Patreon alternative. Please check that out and subscribe. We have tiers and everything on there where we will be providing subscriber-only content. It's the only way to keep going right now because it is crippling what they're doing to us, and our subscriptions are falling like a rock every single day. And if they go up a bit, YouTube just automatically unsubscribes as many people as the people who subscribe. It's just ripping us apart. We need to combat this any way we can. This is incredibly important. That's where you guys all come in such great hands. I mean, we really appreciate the help that we get from you, the viewer. You make it possible for us to do this. But let's get to those solutions. As John went into, like food, water, shelter, self-defense, or not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, gold and silver as wealth insurance, because in this time when we are so dependent on debt, so dependent on banks and government, what's better than having wealth insurance protecting your purchasing power when so many of these problems come from inflation, come from currency printing, the printing press, and on top of that, the issue of people having all their money in the banks and everything. Invest it wisely, folks. Invest in what you want. Break free from that system of pension scams and schemes. I mean, it is a complete pyramid scheme, much of it. We need to break free from that. And of course, as John also mentioned, cryptocurrencies that are properly decentralized and have fundamental value and have a use case going forward, as well as blockchain infrastructure technology, which can replace so much of what we have today. Again, not mark of the beast. Again, not fiat. Fiat is by fiat, by law. It's in the word. And having these other alternatives that we can compete currencies on the market and diversify with gold and silver and everything else that we want as well, that is incredibly crucial to the future of our very being and our independence and responsibility as free human beings. So anyway, John, I appreciate you going into all of this with us today. Can you give us your bottom line on what do you think people should do?
The bottom line here, Josh, is people that are giving all their money over to the agencies, the investment companies, like here in Canada, Investors Group, Sun Life Financial, you got Fidelity, all these guys. They are just fleecing you for money. That's what they do. It's not close to as bad in the United States as it is in Canada. Canada's the worst in the world to rip off their investors. But again, you gotta start to learn things, and one of the ways is, of course, reading some of my books, Canada, Greatest Economy in the World, and The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. In Canada, the greatest economy in the world, I actually go into detail. I actually have my advisor writing a piece about how corrupt those RSP systems are. So you actually get to see like how these are built against you, they're working against you, and you need to educate yourself. You need to take responsibility for yourself and not asking the government, because in Norway now, my home country, you're seeing so many people, including my mom, have been waiting for that government paycheck at the end of the day, but who knows how much of that they're going to actually get now, because they believed in that, but now they're actually ending up being below poverty because they relied on the government to take care of them at the end of their times, instead of actually taking that personal responsibility and putting some money into and educating yourself about how to use the system, because you have to invest today in this fake fiat printing system, because if you don't invest in anything, if you just stay in cash, for example, you're losing mass amounts of money because of inflation. And it's unfortunate that you have to like push your money into all these investments, But again, you have to, but find the good investments, find the real things to protect yourself now, because you need to go into protection mode. Of course, this is my opinion, but that is where we need to be now in the next couple of years, because something big is coming. And it's not just a stock market crash. We're looking at the destruction of the fiat currency system, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we always say, rule yourself, decentralize everything, and prepare yourself, folks. Be responsible, self-sustainable, independent, free human beings. Anyway, thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.